If Russia is seen to start to lose and have to cede terrain, Putin will probably go ugly. He'll probably use non-conventional weapon systems. That's good to recognize the fact that Chequers was used. There's a genuine personal friendship that's developed between the president and the prime minister. And the president clearly is so pleased with the support Britain has provided. I'm not surprised he came here after visiting Berlin and Paris. And this is the build up to the G7 next week, of course, where Ukraine is no doubt going to be on the agenda. But we've been at the forefront of supporting this country with humanitarian aid from the British people, but also that military equipment. You remember the debates about whether a weapon should be offensive or defensive. It was Britain that stepped forward with anti-tank weapons, Britain that stepped forward with tanks, and it was Britain that stepped forward with long-range missiles and now attack drones as well. This is all the build-up to the anticipated counter-offensive in order to flush Russia out. But it's also important to keep that political appetite moving forward. Deep in the in the not too distant future, you've got the American presidential election. What will happen if Donald Trump is elected? I think these are starting to worry the strategists in Europe. So we need to provide not only the ability for Ukraine to flush Russia out, but also the longer term security, so that Russia doesn't simply use any time to regroup, rearm, and then attack again in a couple of years' time, which is, I'm afraid, they have form.
The Ukrainian president has repeated his request for fighter jets, which he first made when he addressed Parliament earlier this year. It's proving to be quite a controversial ask. Do you think the UK should be doing this?
Well, from an operational perspective, the Typhoons that we could slide across the table are Tranche 1s. They're not designed to hit targets on the ground so much. Therefore, they're not really what Ukraine requires. What would happen if we did do this is that it would be symbolic, politically symbolic, and then other nations may follow suit. One thing I'm afraid we've been spooked over a little bit is the Russian rhetoric, is what Putin has been saying about the threat of using tactical nuclear weapons. I suspect, I'm afraid, if this war doesn't go well, and it's absolutely going the wrong way for him, we see that with the Wagner group complaining about not having enough ammunition. If Russia is seen to start to lose and have to cede terrain, Putin will probably go ugly. He'll probably use non-conventional weapon systems, as we've seen in Syria, for example, chemical, biological, and so forth. We need to be certainly prepared for that.
Mm. And your gut feeling, in terms of continuing support for Ukraine. I mean, European leaders clearly on this trip have come up trumps. Germany in particular getting much praise from President Zelensky. But of course, what governments can do depends very much on public opinion remaining steadfast in terms of supporting Ukraine. Is there a danger of that waning? This far into what's feeling like a very long conflict.
Yeah, and this is, it's called Ukraine fatigue, is to give it a name, and a worry that it's just going to turn into a frozen conflict, which would actually suit Putin. That's exactly what he wants. He wants the West to get tired, to start questioning, call for peace talks or some form of discussions. China is already calling for this, but this would be a huge mistake because this would only allow the bully to survive, to fight for another day, as I suggested. But also, it doesn't recognize how significant what's going on in Ukraine affects the rest of European security and indeed the economy. The reason why we're suffering from an inflation here is because food prices have gone up, directly linked to the grain not being able to get out of Ukraine. Oil and gas prices volatile because of what's going on in Ukraine. It's in our interest to solve Ukraine. They've requested our support. They're sitting on the edge of NATO. I still find it baffling that the biggest, most potent military alliance the world has ever seen is still unable to sort of punch forward and do something a little bit more solid in its support in defense of democracy, given a state, a P5 member of the UN Security Council, has invaded another state.
Why do you think that there is this drag from NATO? I mean, does it suggest that NATO's days are numbered, that it's not fit for purpose?
No, well, there are questions about the membership of NATO. We've seen a requirement, a desire for both Finland and Sweden to join, but a reluctance by two other members, namely Hungary and Turkey, who clearly have still close ties with Russia, to prevent their membership. Now, we're getting through that slowly, but it just shows you, because NATO is a consensus-driven organization, it's great if you're inside the club, but not if you're outside. All the operations that I served on, whether it be Bosnia, you take Iraq and Afghanistan, these were NATO missions. They weren't inside NATO. Yet we use that excuse to say NATO will not participate because Ukraine is not a member. Well, again, that's just giving up. That's allowing space for the bully to advance. There is another organization called the Joint Expeditionary Force, 10 like-minded nations that we actually helped set up, all NATO countries, by the way, the Baltics and so forth. And I think if Ukraine could join the JEF, the Joint Expeditionary Force, that would be a stepping stone to support and improve their security. But that needs to be done in balance with the ability of Ukraine to procure its own weapons, because we can't keep gifting our weapon systems and emptying the cupboards over here, for forever.